Well, guys, it's official. We screwed it up.
What?
Dating. Us, millennials. Our lot. We are responsible for toxic dating culture. We are responsible for the fast food style dating that happens these days, for the obsession with texting and swiping and not being able to meet in the real world, because our generation are the ones who created the dating apps that we all know and hate.
I didn't create a dating app.
And now, Stephen, millennials have the gall to create podcasts talking about healthy love. It's as if, now, you know what that's like? The Sacklers who created, what's the one, Oxycontin?
Yeah.
It's like if they started a whole bunch of rehab clinics.
What podcasts have you been watching?
What do you mean?
Sacklers, Oxycontin?
Well, you know,
Dope Sick is a really
it's the same
good
thing.
show.
You invent dating apps, you create a whole bunch of just completely abject dating and toxic, situationships and addiction to our phones. And then you have the gall to talk about what healthy love looks like. How dare we? How dare we?
So let's talk about it.
Well, Stephen, part of the inspiration for this episode was you being quite keen to talk about some of the research out there about the way Gen Z is approaching dating differently from the millennials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was quite a few things on where the trend line is going and Gen Z being at the tip of the spear, so to speak. There's some research on how Gen Z are deprioritizing romantic relationships. The idea that finding a romantic partner isn't a primary goal. Instead, they're prioritizing mental well-being and dreams for their career, their other friendships. Gen Z are more...
Can we just pause on that for a moment? Because that's interesting to me, if true. But can we take that at face value? The idea that Gen Z are not dating because they're focusing on their mental health, because that seems a little bit potentially disingenuous to me. So much of Gen Z lives on their feed. So the idea that I would understand that if it was like, we're done with dating because dating is so toxic. Instead, what we're going to focus on is real life interaction with other people. That would have real legitimacy. But I'm wondering if the idea that I'm focusing on my mental health instead, and then what I turn to is my phone, that's not focusing on your mental health instead. So I just want to challenge that, because I'm all for, if Gen Z are genuinely saying this culture is, I'm not signing up for it anymore. And I think, by the way, Gen Z have really good reason to do that, because Gen Z, unlike the millennials, did not grow up without the apps. And then in adulthood, essentially start seeing the invention of all of these things that change their lives for better or worse. Gen Z have always had the apps. That as far as dating apps go, and when I'm talking about dating apps, I'm not just talking about actual, dating apps that have declared themselves to be so. I'm talking about Instagram. I'm talking about TikTok. I'm talking about everywhere where you can interact, Snapchat, with another human being.
Do you know what the first dating app ever was? Do you know it?
Oh, are you going to say...
MSN Messenger.
Oh, yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah, it was.
Right? And the chat rooms.
But could you just find people on MSN
No,
Messenger?
you could add people.
No, or someone would put you in a group chat. There'd be someone from school you fancy. Then you go, oh, I found your online handle. How's it
Your
going?
MSN. What was it called? MSN? I don't know. Anyway, I used to love MSN Messenger. Spent a lot of time on there.
Same.
Did you guys used to, was it just me? Or did you guys used to change your name to cryptic lyrics?
Oh, no.
When you were going through a hard time, so that people were like, what's wrong? And you were like, it's fine.
No, I didn't.
No, okay.
I did know people who did that.
Yeah, I was one of those people.
No, I would talk to someone that's from, that I fancied, would be talking all night on MSN Messenger, but then I'd be shy at school the next day and be like, all right.
Yeah, just pretend they didn't exist.
Yeah.
Do you remember discovering that on a landline you could do a three-way call?
I do remember that.
I remember that being a big deal, where you'd sit on a three-way call, but there'd be one person on there would be someone you fancied, and the other one would just be a mate or their mate or something. And it was like easier to pretend like you had the cover of the fact that 3 of you were all talking on the phone, but really you were only on the phone for one person on that call.
I didn't do that, but that sounds like I missed out on a trick there.
It was fun. But now that I think about it, I think my mate was thinking the same thing. So like we both thought that we were having a moment with the one girl on the call. And she was just loving the attention from both. She was like existing in Twilight.
Yeah.
So Gen Z had none of those things.
Gen Z always had dating apps. And so I understand, Gen Z being like, I am
and social media.
over this. Yeah, they've always had them. I'm over this. This is awful. They're so much closer to them. And in that way, like Gen Z, in a strange way, they have a lot more skepticism of them in many ways, I think. They see through them much more easily because they're like, we know this game inside out. We've grown up with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas millennials, I think there's a lot more, there was a novelty to millennials having dating apps because millennials were like, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. I can just meet someone in my pajamas sitting at home. If you want to know what it was like Gen Z, if you're watching this and you want to know what it was like for millennials to have these things, watch a 60-year-old come out of a 40-year marriage today and go on the apps for the first time. And they're like, this is unbelievable. Look at all, like, this is crazy. And there's like, it's all new. It's all fresh. It's all novel. That's what it was for millennials. And millennials remember a time when they had to just go and meet in person, where they had to go to a bar and try and chat someone up and do that whole thing. And I think that I've read on certain forums where Gen Z is saying like, talking about the heyday of before the apps when you met people in real life. And if you were there in that heyday, that it wasn't like, it was not that easy.
No.
You had to go out, see someone across the room in a social environment and walk over there and talk to them.
It was easy for women. It was hard for men because men would be the ones to do that and women wouldn't.
But it wasn't easy for women. It was hard for women because women, I would argue actually it was in some ways harder for women because, Bumble came along, for example, and gave women a way to make a move.
It's true.
Right? Women before were conditioned to believe they shouldn't be making the move. So
women are still conditioned to believe they shouldn't make the move.
Right, but we've made some progress on that kind of continuum. But if you look at what women were doing then, it was like be at this very passive state of waiting for someone to come over to you and talk to you. It was kind of horrible for men and women. Women had to just wait and be chosen, or at least they thought. Men felt like they had to constantly be going over and approaching strangers, which was tricky at best. Most men have done it at some point, especially from that generation, and know the awkward situation of getting, completely rejected and having to just stroll back to the part of the room that you came from because it didn't work out. It was hard. So I think, one thing I want to say to Gen Z out there is that I think it's sometimes we look back on what the heyday must have been like, and it wasn't, it was hard.
But there's a lot, and I think that Stephen, you've pulled some really interesting data around this. There's a lot of data that's suggestive that Gen Z are kind of giving up in a way that actually I don't think the millennials were giving up. Because I do think it was hard, you're right, but I think that the culture, even when the apps first started out, right, the culture on the apps were kind of different because people were still used to a world where they wanted to invest in each other, where they still kind of understood the value of a connection. Whereas I do think that has been eroded over time, and people really struggle on the apps today because of the lack of intentionality that exists on there. And I think that what that's led to is some really interesting kind of almost rejection of dating from Gen Z, right?
Yeah, so there was a survey by, I don't know what it is, but there was a dating app called Fleur that found that 70% of Gen Zers find dating apps to be lame, and only 6% of them want them to stay the way they are. 4 in 10 claimed they were tired of the endless swiping. And a Hinge 2024 report said that many Gen Z daters cite fear of rejection and being cringe amongst their top concerns. So there is this kind of hedging. So there's kind of a lot of think pieces about how, and again, the Gen Z audience can speak to this, whether this is true, but Gen Z have been more likely to find themselves in situationships. Some are embracing a more what they call relationship anarchy, where they're saying, you know what, I don't want to have this prioritizing, trying to find Disney fairy tale love. I want to just nurture all my connections I have. And maybe I have a great soul connection with my roommate. Maybe I have it with a friend. Maybe I have it with someone else I know. And it's like a kind of deprioritizing of romance. Other articles say they're embracing, again, there's all these weird terms. One is explorationships, which is like, let's not put any labels on it right away. Let's just see what happens. So it's not like, what would you call it? It's not like pure avoidance where you don't talk about it. It's not like love bombing. It's kind of this in between where you go, let's just explore the connection, but not have any pressure to put labels on it. Let's just go. And so
players have been selling that for years.
No, I was going to say
this is like the dream.
That's true, but I think there's supposed to be more.
There's
of
a word for it now, and it's okay.
But what
it.
I get from a lot of this is there's a lot of hedging. There's a lot of like, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be cringe. I don't want to be too vulnerable. And there's a kind of allergy to vulnerability. And there's a kind of feeling of, I don't want to make romance this big thing because there's so much that might not work or disappointment involved.
It's interesting because in a recent episode we talked about how there are a lot of people, millennials and older, who are kind of checking out of dating altogether because they're just tired of the nonsense that they face when they try to date. And that got a lot of comments, that episode. And there were a lot of women especially who talked about the peace that they feel in opting out of dating altogether and just not having to deal with it. This is an interesting kind of different twist that you're talking about with Gen Z, where it's, I'm not opting out of dating necessarily. I'm just opting out of having any expectations within dating.
You know what I think though? I wonder how much of this is age specific, because I don't know about you guys, when I was in my 20s, I was far more concerned about making sure that I didn't come across as too intense, not cool, not cringe, not too keen, that I was preoccupied with the idea of not finding love. But I think as you get older, millennials, boomers, you go out in dating, whether you're going back out in dating or you're just looking for love, and you kind of go, well, I've got a bit of a time constraint here. Like I do have to try and actually really look for somebody, and I don't have all the time in the world. I'm not 25, I'm not 26, I'm not 27. Even 28, 29 are like kind of times where you don't need to bring that same intentionality to dating. And I wonder how much of it is actually just a cyclical thing. Because the other thing that I think is quite interesting is I think so many people in their 20s, and I was one of those people, almost rejected the apps because they felt shame at the idea of being on the apps. Like I don't want to be someone who's like looking for love on the apps because that's embarrassing. And then as you get older, you're like, I don't care about like being someone who's looking for love on the apps. It's just another means of meeting someone, and that's a goal for me and that's a priority. And you drop that bravado a little bit. But I do think there's a lot of people who are still, and people in their 20s who are still very much like in that space of the priority is that I don't get rejected, I don't feel embarrassed, I don't come across in this way, and I'm just like heavily producing the way that I'm coming across to the opposite sex.
Yeah.
I think there's so much when you're younger you are, you seem to be a bit more hung up on process, like romanticizing how it should go. Like I want us to reach for the same cup of coffee and then we look at each other and smile, and I want it to feel like I don't know, a 90s sitcom like Friends or something. There's all this like nostalgia, romance, how it wants to feel, instead of like, yeah, but how's it going to feel when you're with them? And there is a kind of like straightforwardness as you get older, where it's like, I don't really care the how. The how is not actually important. It's actually finding the person who I can build a life with. I do think in a way that is a bit of that feels like an age thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think the idea that like younger people are exploring explorationships is there's something to me like a bit abstracted from human nature in that, because we didn't evolve out of being territorial beings in the space of the last 15 years. We didn't evolve to the point where now we don't get jealous. And anyone who's ever liked someone at some point, probably within the first 5 minutes, starts thinking, I really hope they don't date anyone else. Like, I hope they just date me. You know, that I can't imagine that went away, because there's human nature to that. And the moment you start dating someone you like, I don't care what you say about like, we're just seeing where it goes. And there's always some kind of imbalance there that happens, where one person is very much open. One person is going, let's see where it goes, because they want to keep their options open. And the other person is saying, let's see where it goes, because they don't want to lose the other person. And they feel like that's the right thing to say, to not lose the other person. I'm not saying there aren't some people who don't mind taking it slow because they're confident and they're just trying to figure out whether they like this person or not. But at the point where you know you like someone, that's the point at which when you hear they're dating someone else, you're probably going to get hurt.
But it depends what you're prioritizing, right? Because if you're prioritizing being cool, not getting rejected, coming across as the one who's in control, and that's your North Star, and that's the most important thing to you, then I see a world where you can absolutely brainwash yourself into thinking, I am all for this explorationship thing, because actually, like, I'm really relaxed, and I'm also looking, and I'm also, you know, it's kind of you like almost like appropriate the other person's excuse.
Well, but that requires you to stay somewhat disconnected. Right, you have to actively focus on not connecting to that person in this situation, because
that's really interesting. I think just what you just said is really, really interesting, because I think that is what happens so often in dating, especially when you're dating in your 20s, is you are disconnected, because you're not necessarily connected to the value and the need and the urgency of meeting somebody. And so you are more connected to your ego and how you come across, and how does this person make me look, and, you know, all of the things, and what's my kind of exterior that I'm projecting outwards to the world. I think you are more connected to that than all the other things. And I do think that's something that if you don't find what you're looking for within the time frame that you're comfortable in, you then start to drop.
You start to lose some of those specifics on what you think you must have,
and then you start to actually connect because you have to, because it becomes a priority. I think there's a lot to that.
There's also this trend I've seen on TikTok where a lot of people are showing off their dates now, and kind of almost like the image is, look at how wined and dined I'm being, look at how well this person's giving me like princess treatment.
Oh, I thought you meant their dates as in the person. You mean they're
showing off like,
date
this is the date, and there's a kind of whole like glamour to showing off. I saw one, and it was like a woman was saying, you know, don't believe the bad press about finance bros. This was my first date with this guy in London. And it shows them going to like, it's like a 2 Michelin star Mayfair restaurant. She talks about how we just got here. He said she'll have the champagne without even asking me. She'll have the champagne. She's like, oh my God. And it was showing all this stuff. And it was like, he ordered the souffle for us. But it was just like, this is an insane first date.
But
and
also,
this is
whoever said,
this is
when
like,
was the press about finance bros ever that they don't splash out?
Oh, I think the press is like